and welcome back to the Men's Journal Everyday Warrior podcast. I'm excited about this one because you are the first legitimate cowboy I've had on.
I love it.
I mean, I got a country music star that sits in pretty much all the local ones, Drew Fish.
Yeah.
But I don't know much about the PBR. It fascinates me from the sense of who in their right mind gets on a, what's the average weight? 1,500, 1,800?
1,800, yeah, sure enough. A lot.
People like to look at me and say, you guys were crazy. And I mean, in all rights, the guys I served with were professional gunfighters. Yep. But when you're a team of 40 badasses and you're going against the enemy, I mean, we've mitigated risk before we even step outside the wire. So,
it's amazing the similarities, really, in I think in the mindset, in that fear factor, as far as, compartmentalizing, what you've got to do going to, I would never even try to, put in my head what you guys have been through. My dad was an Air Force fighter pilot in Vietnam, and
God bless.
Just, and something I really, truly admired you guys and what you guys did and do. And so I would never put the two of us together. But as far as the mindset and that kind of fear and trying to put it somewhere.
I appreciate that. But the variables we deal with, I mean, we got good at mitigating those variables. I mean, you can never reduce risk, but you're stepping on a wild animal that, I don't know if the bulls want to hurt whoever's on their back, if that's in their nature, but I mean, you're dealing with a beast for which you just can't account for those factors, man.
And maybe that's a little bit of the draw. It's just the unknowing, and you go in knowing that one thing that there is no knowing, because they are a living, breathing animal that has every intention of getting rid of you and basically getting the hell out of there. And that's their job. And the bulls nowadays have been raised since they were just young babies to buck, and that's what they are. So they're not beef cattle. They're hybrid type cattle, and their sole purpose is to buck you off.
So I know the athletes, the riders have gotten better,
yes.
But so have the bulls.
Sure. Oh yeah, we're having a hard time keeping up with the bull power. Let's put it this way, and they're winning. They're definitely winning. The percentages have gone down, and the human body can only put up with so much physical damage. So it's
okay. Totally understand that aspect. Well, I'm also excited because I really consider the Austin Gamblers really Austin's first professional team. I know there's some soccer team I've heard about. No disrespect to Matthew McConaughey.
Appreciate that.
But
too.
I'll say the first American professional sports team.
And we are. Even though our first draft pick is from Brazil, but he doesn't even want to go back to Brazil. He's an American. He wants to be an American.
We actually have a Brazilian in the crowd right here in Naira, so she's smiling at that one.
Okay.
But I can understand that. You come to the land of opportunity. He's
Absolutely.
Crushing it. Why would he want to go back?
They don't.
Yeah. It makes sense. So, Michael, your life and your career in PBR is pretty damn fascinating. But let's go back to New Mexico. And did I read this correctly? Your first pony was named Popcorn?
Popcorn, 2.5 years old, and my mother was the antagonist to that. My dad was a fighter pilot, a baseball player out of Iowa, no rodeo ranching background whatsoever, and
Farmer?
Popcorn. Farmer, grew up on the farm, cornfields of Iowa, big strapping, was throwing the ball really, really fast, got drafted to possibly play in the majors, to play baseball, and at the same time, he got drafted in the Korean War and had a deferment because he was in college. Anyway, long story short, ended up staying out of the war in Korea, and then went into officer training school and then on into jets and became a fighter pilot in Vietnam. Sure enough.
How many tours in Vietnam?
He did two in the F4. Yep.
One tour in Vietnam was enough for anyone. So that's God bless him, man.
So. Yep.
I mean, that was a different breed.
They were, yeah.
I always look fondly on the older generations. I mean, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and they paved the way for us very much. But so I'm assuming Popcorn was not intended to buck you. It was a softer ride.
He was, but if anybody knows anything about Shetland ponies, even though they're small, they are mighty, and the small man syndrome, they absolutely epitomize that. I mean, he was probably 2.5 foot tall, and he didn't really know anything other than to buck or bite.
No kidding.
And, he died at the age of almost 36 years old. He was my age. We celebrated the same birthday, basically, and I'm giving you a lot of boring details. But I come back from college, and he was lapping up dog food in the back porch because he had no teeth left. But yeah, he was so mean, he wouldn't die.
So popcorn was around for most of your young adult life.
Yeah, he was basically alive until I quit riding in the pros at 35 years old.
You're kidding me.
No, he's, again, I think people live longer if they're mean and just have something to prove, I guess. And but he was really he was my bucking machine as a small kid, for sure.
That's amazing. Was it pretty hard when the time came?
Yeah, it was. But again, at 35, you see a horse that lives 25, 30 years old. That's a long life. So he lived a really good life. He sure enough did.
When was the first time or let me put it this way, do you remember the first time you saw a rodeo?
My recollection of seeing a rodeo was the first one I was entered in, and I was 5 years old. My brother was 10 years older than I was in high school rodeo and that type of thing, and they had an exhibition riding, and I left Sunday school, and I put on my Sears green chaps and my matching green vest out of the Sears catalog with my cowboy hat. And I think we just moved off the base out of Holloman, New Mexico, Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. And I still remember the day. I remember it was kind of cloudy, and I was pumped. I still remember. I get little chills down my neck when I think about it. And I didn't last about a jump, but I really was. I was hooked from then on.
So what is a 5-year-old ride?
Well, back then at that time, they were just roping steers. So they probably weighed 600 pounds. They were like steer wrestling steers, and to me it was a giant, but it was more like a large dog more than it was anything with horns. And from then on it was something that I had to do and aspired to be a rodeo cowboy from that day forward. I was watching everything I could, from Larry Mahan to Phil Line, to guys like that. I will say the exposure to that world of cowboys was pretty limited in New Mexico. And, of course, my mother and dad not having the roots that a lot of my friends did, I didn't have the exposure. But wherever it was, I was, to be sure, sponging it up.
Was that generation that you just mentioned, that had to be one tough group of cowboys? I mean, I got to assume whiskey was running through their veins most of the time.
Well, there's one down here. He won the world in 1973. Bobby Steiner is a cowboy from here. His son Sid was a steer wrestling world champion in the early 2000s. Bobby won the world, like I said, in the PRCA in '73, and you're talking about guys that were tough. They were tough cowboys, and that's what I aspired to be. I mean, I had an older brother that was 10 years older and roped and that type of thing. But my dad was a tough guy, and I always wanted to be like that. And I thought the epitome of a tough guy was a cowboy. And we had a feed store in and around that area. There was a horse race cowboy trainer. His name was Walter Merrick. He was famous, and my son's named after him. And I just remember carrying out big sacks of feed out to his truck when I was 6, 7 years old, and they were big. I just had to prove that I could carry a 100-pound sack of feed and prove to that old man that I was tough. And he became my inspiration too, because he was
mentor.
Coach? He never really was. We delivered feed to this man up the Rio Dosa Downs, the All-American Futurity, and he was just a famous horse race trainer. And every time I saw that man, I thought, that's what I want to be. I want to be a guy like that, a tough cowboy with my boots and my dirty jeans and my old pickup. And even though he was a pretty well-off man. That's
great. We all need mentors. We all need coaches. We need inspiration.
Yep.
Now, additionally, I mean, from reading your story, you seem like a man that knows what he wants. You met your wife at 12?
I saw her. We'd finished. I'd stayed with a friend of mine up off I-40 between outside of Gallup, New Mexico, and it was at the rodeo dance. Everybody's been to the rodeo dance, back in the 4-H rodeos and those types of days. And I saw her. I was probably 12 or 13, and I still remember what she was wearing. I thought, my God, she just lit up the room, and she didn't think twice about me. I was just, a peon.
Well, did you even have the balls to go introduce yourself in that one?
I met her just because through this friend of mine who I was staying with, who was quite a bit older. His mother and dad and her folks went to college together, And so I got a little bit of an in. But, jump ahead about, 5-6 years, we connected right during college and we never looked back. We got married after 6 months and after my freshman year in college, and we've been together now almost 34 years.
So. Today is actually the 54th anniversary for my parents.
54 years. Congratulations.
That's loyalty to the core.
Yeah.
Where did you guys go to college?
So she started down in Alpine. Initially. She got a heck of a scholarship down there, and then I went to West Texas College there in Western Texas in Snyder
on scholarship,
a rodeo scholarship.
Okay.
So a lot of people didn't realize, but there's rodeo colleges all over the nation, mostly in the in the Midwest on out westbound, but. And then there's a college national finals that I went to 3 years, 88, 89, and 90. And the western region, which you can imagine, the Cowboys in Texas, that's where you want to go because that's where you excel. You want to be against the best. And that's where the heart of the rodeo cowboy was. And I was behind. And when I left high school and went over to Snyder, I was behind those guys. But you're only as good as who you're around, right? And they make you better. And you either step up or get left behind.
It's you either play it safe and be a big fish in a small pond, or you step against the best. And I mean,
who wants
iron sharpens iron. I mean, what is it, Proverbs 15:13? Iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another. I mean, that's the only way you improve.
I agree.
And funny enough, a good friend, Tyson Mendiaz, he used to go to Chuck Liddell's fighting center, and he's like, it was the toughest group of guys. And he talks about how he was not nearly the most talented, but merely by fighting those guys day in and day out and getting his ass kicked, he's like, I'd stand against anyone.
Yep.
Yeah. So you even did rodeo. I mean, you guys had a high school team. Is that correct?
We did. We in New Mexico, when you're high school rodeo, you just kind of come up in the ranks. I played baseball. I played football, and it's no different from that. Babe Ruth and baseball, and you kind of go up each little tier. And so I 4-H rodeoed, then junior rodeoed, and then high school rodeoed, and went to the national high school finals a few times. And we had some really great cowboys, Indian cowboys alike, out in New Mexico, and a lot of the top cowboys that you've heard, Tuff Edeman, Cody Lambert, these types of guys were from New Mexico. They high school rodeoed in New Mexico. They were older than I was. A couple of my dearest, friends, they obviously helped form the PBR back in '92. But a lot of great cowboys out there. And that's what you did. You just kind of followed the group before you, your elders, so to speak, and your mentors, and you wanted to be like them and ride like them. And so that's what I always aspired to be.
You definitely followed the path of the previous generation.
Sure.
However, you did something very unique, and you were one of 19 riders that broke off from the rodeo circuit.
Yes.
And started the PBR. But before we get to that, so you graduate college. And go direct. I mean, did you know, hey, I'm just going to start competing?
I did. WTC is only a junior college, and Robin was, she moved up to Snyder, and here's a very type A individual and a physician. She became a physician, jumping ahead, but she couldn't stay in Snyder to go to school, so we moved to Lubbock, and she went to Texas Tech, became a Red Raider, and it was an ideal situation for me because I turned professional and was able to fly in and out of Lubbock, being so central. To Dallas, Fort Worth, or to Denver, and get just about anywhere I could, want to go. So it was an ideal situation for her to go to medical school and for me to start my pro career in the bull riding world. And so it was a really great. And of course, if you know West Texas people in general, I mean, the salt of the earth. I mean, when I left in '96, I was truly bummed out. When I moved there, I moved out of the mountains of New Mexico. I wasn't real happy because it was pretty windy and dirty but it grew on me. It really did. And when I left there 10 years later, I was sad because, they were who I belonged there, and still have really close friends there in Lubbock to this day. And it's still, I consider my home.
Well, we got something in common. We're both married to Red Raiders.
Oh,
so, yeah.
All right. There you go.
I'm an Aggie and a Longhorn, very divided house.
Very good.
But I've got to pull for A&M because Jimbo Fisher actually is pulling out some good seasons. We'll see if UT turns it around.
It turns around. Yep.
So these 19 riders that broke off,
right?
I've got to assume that you guys were, because I know JJ told me the story. Basically, I don't want to say you were taken advantage of, but weren't being compensated for the level you guys were riding at, and you had an idea, said, hey, let's make the professional bull riding circuit,
right,
and compensate these riders to do this on a professional level for.
And that's it, Michael. That's exactly what there was. Other antagonists, I think, that put us on that hotel room that day in Scottsdale. We went to a bull riding that day, and it was one of those non-sanctioned, just strictly bull ridings, that we went to every year. They'd be $500, $1,000 entry fees, and they were throughout. You've heard of the Super Bowl down in Del Rio. We went to that every May. So these were types of bull ridings that we went to throughout the year, whether it be Lane Frost and Tuff and Cody, Ty Murray, Jim Sharp. I mean, the best of the best in the world were always at these bull ridings, and myself included, because I just turned professional, and we were also PRCA rodeoing, which Austin used to be sanctioned by the PRCA. I believe it is to this day, but to cut to the chase, it was just there was a lot of things happening in the world of bull riding. The television started coming into it, and when you take a bunch of kind of egocentric type cowboys or warriors such as yourself, you can't go to pushing these guys around, because they're gonna set back on their heels and tell you to piss off, right? They're just going to, and that's what happened. That's one of those antagonists happened to put us in that room that day, and we said, hey, we're gonna throw in $1,000 a piece, and then we had a name, and I will tell you, Robin was just about to go into medical school, and I'd won some money that day. And I called her later that night and told her that I wrote a check for $1,000.
Oh boy!
And it was not a good night at the Gaffney household, because she was, she knew who I was traveling with and who I was around, and she knew they were great guys, wild cowboys. But she said, well, what the hell's in a name? You got a name, but you're still not going to make any more money. I said, well, maybe someday. And it truly was a pipe dream, Michael. When we all got together that day, it was just a hope that maybe we could stick together and put something together, and jumping ahead a couple of 2-3 years, the real ace in the hole here is the man we picked up to be our leader. And when we speak about leaders and how important they are, this man truly changed the platform for professional bull riding, and that's Randy Bernard. He came out of California in '95, and the best part of this story is we said, look, when he decided to come with us, the PRCA was kind of looking out for him too, and we kind of went underneath them and said, hey, you got to come work for the real cowboys, And we told him, he said, now that you have the job, you got to do one thing. And he said, what was that? And he said, well, you got to make $50,000. And he said, only 50. He said, well, if you don't make $50,000, you're not going to get paid, because we didn't have any money. And furthermore, when we moved him to Colorado Springs, he came in a little half-ton pickup and a bag. And we put him in a mop closet in a bank building in downtown Colorado Springs. And that's the honest God truth. You couldn't fit that drum set in that mop closet. And 5 years later, we gave $1 million to our first world champion. So
I can assume prior to the PBR, you guys were breaking even, if you were lucky on all?
Oh yeah. I got to tell you this, Michael. In 1991, I went to my first National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas. And that's what you did. You went to 100 rodeos a year to get to that 10 days.
You competed in 100 rodeos a year.
Well, that was, Donnie Gay back in the days in the 70s and 80s, early 80s, he was going to 125, 150. He had an airplane. We had an airplane in 91. And so you were doing your best to make as many rodeos as you could, because you qualified on money. And they took the top 15 qualifiers on money. So you basically... When I went to the NFR in December of '91, I was in the hole by probably, a handful. If it wasn't for the bull ridings we're speaking of, I would have been in the hole big time. But that's where you make your gravy throughout the whole season, was to make the NFR. And then if you didn't make it, you were crap out of luck. And I rode 9 out of 10 bulls, won the average my first year there. And in 2 months after Uncle Sam got a hold of me, I was dead crack broke again. So that was, another one of those antagonists that put us in that room.
So I've got to assume the 19 of you pissed off the powers that be within the rodeo world. I mean, you guys had to be going, more or less, you were going against the current when you started this.
We were, but I will tell you this. They thought, and that being the big contractors who controlled everything, and the powers that be that ran the office and the PRC in Colorado Springs, they thought there's no way you've got 12, 15, 18, 20 guys with these big of heads, these big egos will ever stick together. And that was I think a dare to us to say, you know what, whatever we do, we got to stick together and make this happen.
So let me ask this: the 19 until you brought on, and again, his name was Randy
Bernard.
Bernard.
I got to tell you this. So now he's managing Garth Brooks. So here's a man that is. I mean, the guy he's a phenom. He's really not from this planet. He truly is not only a great human being, but he's got a special gift. He really does.
But for those 3 years, you 19 would meet regularly, get on the phone.
Oh yeah.
You ran the business until you said, "Hey, Randy, we need you to come in and run the business."
Basically, yep.
So that's an American story right there, man.
It's a great
in
it's
19
a great story. Yeah.
Legitimate American cowboys.
Yep.
That is a beautiful story, man.
It is.
I love that.
Yeah. It's a great story, Michael.
So
thanks.
You went on to become a big name in rodeo riding, and you won the 1997 World Championship. Was that the culmination for you?
It was, and you know, my dad was there, and he was always, and I say this because I have a son of my own. He was always fearful of bull riding, even though he was this tough fighter jock and everything. He was a real big-hearted guy, and I missed my first high school rodeo because he drove me over to it, and I missed it. I don't think I talked to him for a month because I missed my first big bull riding in high school, and I didn't know how fearful he was until I had my own son 13 years ago. To know true vulnerability when you have your child. So it was a big thing for me for him to be there and watch me win that world championship in '97 because he loved being around the guys, the cowboys, because they were a lot like you guys, his veteran buddies.
Yes.
They were just their moral fabric. I met a lot of them that he flew with, a lot of them that came, did come back, and they were, shot up and everything, and they were just good guys. And he was able to communicate and get along with a lot of those bull riders because of who they were as people. And so I'm glad you got to be a bond.
I get it. So there's a bond amongst soldiers, only further solidified by combat. But I mean, regardless of it being an individual sport, and amongst U19, I know U19 you continue to compete against one another.
Yep.
I'm sure you guys watch each other, and you watch somebody beat that bull, and you're wildly happy for them, or you watch somebody get hurt, and you know what they're going for.
Yeah, there's that bond. Like I said, I could never put myself in your shoes and what you guys have been through, but I'd like to think that there's that similar type bond that we have as individuals in our own worlds that are similar, because those guys they're like brothers, and we live together. Like I said, when we were going to rodeos every day, we go to that one 4th of July in 1991, we went to 11 rodeos in 8 days. I mean, you kind of almost forget what your wives and girlfriends look like. You're with your pards, but it was a great lifestyle. And when you're rodeoing with those guys that had your back, I mean, there's
that's a brotherhood.
It's a brotherhood. It's just there's nothing better.
So I've got to ask. You said you didn't talk to your dad for a month. Do you still to this day suspect that he slow rolled getting to the rodeo competition?
Oh, yeah.
Did he ever come out and admit it?
No, he never did. I think I called him on it one time, sometime later, probably when I was in the, a little bit later. But he's, after that, he was really, I think once I got over that hump, he knew that I was serious, because that was a really big leap. When you go from junior riding bulls, junior bulls to big bulls, it's serious. You're talking about, I guess it'd be like a little league player stepping out and looking at a 102-mile fastball. I mean, it's a big change, and something it's daunting for a young kid.
It's the most amazing thing, and I understand it because it tore my dad up to watch me go to combat. I mean, I came home wounded after my second deployment of 10 deployments, and he was a hard man. Yeah. And now I understand. Like, I had no problem, just like your dad had no problem probably going to combat. But when it's your son or your daughter, it's an entirely different thing. And I'm so glad that my son has no desire to go into the military. He's 14.
Because I was going to ask
Things
you,
can change.
So we're right on the same page. I mean, your son's 14. Mine's going to be 14 here in August.
Okay.
And I caught him one time on the family dog, the German Shepherd, and I said, "You get off that dog." But other than that, he's never aspired, and thank goodness he's never really. Maybe he's just more intelligent than I ever was. He's never really wanted to be a bull rider, which is great because I don't know how I'd handle it. Maybe like you and your son, going to something like that, it'd be difficult.
So, Michael, you do have another. I mean, you won the world championship. You do have another record in the books, which actually held for a long time until one of your riders broke it. Tell us about the longest, highest scoring ride.
Well, that bull was kind of a nemesis of mine, and he was at that time a 2-time Buck and Bull of the Year, Little Yellow Jacket, and the weekend before that I'd gotten him ridden there in Nampa, Idaho. My last year, I was 35 years old, and I'd really, Michael, I'd worn out my welcome. It was time for me I was close, and I was feeling lots of surgeries, broken hands, both shoulders totally redone, knees, broken jaws, lots of stuff busted. And but I still had something to prove. I'd been home so much with injuries that I still had a few things to do. And when I stepped out there and got the bull road there at Nampa, Idaho, like I said, in 2004, it propelled me to finish out the year. And I went in at, like I said, almost 36 years old. I rode 6 out of 8 bulls. I ended up second or third of the world finals that year, and it was a great culmination of my career. I walked out, I won the last go-around of my career. I rode that bull again. I had him in the short go at the world finals, and got the buckle of that round, that final go-around, the short go we called it. So it was a really great explanation point to put on my career, and I walked away, and it was a great lifestyle.
How hard was it to let go?
I think right then it was easier because I was pretty, I was dealing with a torn groin. I was dealing with a pretty busted up elbow. But about a month later, and I was started feeling normal, I thought it's time to go back and crawl on again because I didn't feel right. You're always dealing with something, right? And I thought I'm gonna have to go shut my hand in the car door or something, just to feel normal. And I still miss it. I mean.
So you almost pulled a Tom Brady and came out of retirement.
No. We pulled a thing a few years ago. One of the old guys. We did some stuff for wounded veterans. A bunch of us old guys got on as a kind of just a kick, and I didn't go very good. So I was done at 35. It was time.
What is the average span of a bull rider?
I like to think that everybody's different just because of what they're dealing with, and I got to say this. One of our only 3-time world champions was one of my traveling partners, and he was the first Brazilian who came over here, and he was our first world champion in the PBR, and that's Adriano Moraes. And when I finished in 2004, I told him going up the elevator that I was done. He was clearly upset. He said, "You can't leave me, brother." And I said, "I'm done." I said, "I'm busted up." And he'd won 2 already, and he was the same age as me. He won his 3rd world title 2 years later. He was 36 and a half years, almost 37, I think, and he won a 3rd world title. So to answer your question, I think it's different for every guy. Yeah. But if you're 30, young 30s, and you're riding these types of animals, you've made it a long ways.
You got a shelf life.
Yeah,
you're coming up on it.
No, most definitely.
So, Michael, we're going to go to a mid-roll break, but before we do, we call it the hard questions. So we're going to hit you with 2 questions. First one is, hardest decision you ever had to make in your life?
Probably coming back to ride in 1994. This was just after we formed the PBR. I'd gotten hurt that year. I missed the NFR in just that year, and by $600. My traveling partner, who was raised right here in Dripping Springs, a lot of guys know the name Brent Thurman. We lost him at the world finals in the 10th round, and I was out working cattle in Amarillo, and Robin called me and said that you need to go to Vegas. Brent got hurt. So, but to answer your question, to decide to go back and ride, because I was done. I'd missed the finals. I had been hurt a lot leading up to that, and the PBR is just barely in its infancy, and I didn't know if I wanted it anymore. And so that was a really difficult decision for me to say, hey, I can still do this, and I need to do it for me. because Brent would want me to, because that's what we did and we loved it. And even though why he was taken, there was a lot of questions I had to answer, but that was my most difficult decision, I think, in my life, to come back.
So his death was the impetus to put you back in one last time to give it a shot.
Yeah.
And
was.
I mean,
and to move on. And it was tough for about 6 months. And once I got over that hump, and I knew he was with me in spirit, because he was a spiritual guy and a really God-fearing man, and just the best individual you can ever imagine. Like I said, he was raised right here in Dripping Springs, and I was really blessed to rodeo with him.
Biggest regret of your life? Pretty cheesy to say that I don't. And because of what I chose to do, I think it proves that I didn't have any regrets. I think if I wouldn't have chose to go back and ride, I would have had that regret to not get back on and finish out a career that I dreamed of ever since I was a 4-year-old kid. So I really don't. If there would be one, I didn't have my son until I was almost 40 years old. I'd go back and have 3 more. I totally understand. I've got 2.
Yep. Good.
And I'm remarried, and she wants more.
I can see why.
I just don't want to be the guy with the cane at the high school.
Trying to chase him around.
At the high school graduation where people are saying, "Is that your grandfather?"
Must be your granddad, yeah.
Okay. Well, Michael, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the Men's Journal Everyday Warrior podcast. Michael Gaffney's joined us, PBR World Champion, and now the head coach of the Austin Gamblers. So PBR has taken a very interesting turn. We'll call it the evolution of the sport.
Evolution, absolutely.
And is it safe to say they're going away from individual sports, or they're still individual rides, but now they're introducing the team aspect?
Absolutely. You nailed it, Michael. And we just crowned our 2022 world champion in May in Fort Worth. So the platform has changed, so you're still going to have your individual world champion every year. It's just a condensed season for that. And then the second part of the year will be for the team series that we're about to start, where we're doing the preseason, obviously. Then we'll start that first event in Cheyenne in July, at the end of July. So you kind of having our cake and eat it too, as it were.
I'm excited to actually attend one of these things and see it in action, man.
Yeah. You'll enjoy it, just being what you are. You'll love it.
I'm almost. So do you know much about SEAL training?
I can't. I mean, obviously, I've watched many films, and my son is kind of a crazy maniac. He's watching it because he's about the training. So
there's this thing called Hell Week, and it's 5 days without sleep. And I mean, you're going through it, and again, it's tough, and you don't want to quit, and you make it through it.
Right.
But when I went back and watched it, as an instructor, and then I came back years later and watched it again, I thought we were going to kill these kids.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that when I watched your athletes, and I love that word, athletes, because people don't usually use that with rodeo riders, but it's the same thing with NASCAR. I mean, they're athletes, man.
They are. They really are.
And I want to talk about their regimen as well, but I think I'm going to be nervous watching Jose get on the back of a 1,800-pound bull. I'm going to fear for his safety.
Yeah, and JJ, has been introduced to our world in the last handful of months, and he's, coming from a baseball background and that type of thing. And
let's stop there. Baseball players are not athletes. I'm trying to remember the one baseball player that said, "An athlete? I'm not an athlete. I'm a baseball player."
Yeah, baseball player. Yeah. Well, I was talking to one of the guys that works for the PBR and helps run these teams, and he was working with the Marlins and stuff down there. I don't know exactly what, and saying that these guys are playing 170 games a year and stuff like that. I mean, it's just nuts. I mean, and I see these guys and their workout regimens and what they do, and our guys are no different. I mean, they just having this opponent that they're up against these days. I mean, they really are. They've got to be in the best physical shape to handle it, number one, but then deal with the injuries afterwards.
Give me a contrast of how you trained to how these guys train now, because I know they're on workout regimens, they're on diet regimens.
Absolutely.
I mean, I always envisioned your generation just drinking whiskey, getting on a bowl, half drunk, and I'm joking.
Yeah. No, it's pretty close. I mean, now I would say that was more, speaking of evolution, we saw a taste of that, and I will say most of my stuff was just a recovery and PT and physical therapy and that type of thing to get back on. It wasn't the weekly regimen because it wasn't sport specific. I mean, everybody would just go on and do squats and the curls and everything trying to. Now, I grew up on a unicycle, grew up on walking a pipe fence, climbing a 40-foot hay. We tied a hay barn, climbing a rope. These types of things to make yourself strong and your core and everything else. But again, the evolution that we've seen since my day of 2000, early 2000, mid 2000s to now is night and day, and rightfully so because of what's available to them. And that's what's so interesting and so exciting for me is to watch these guys really take this serious and really raise the bar in every facet of our sport. And I can legitimately say this, Michael, that we are and they are true athletes because they have to be of what they're dealing with.
I'm sure they appreciate that, but when I speak to companies, I start all my speeches with this quote. If I've seen further, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. And that is usually the previous generation laying the path. Because, I mean, take the NFL, for example. I mean, those playing in the NFL in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, those were hard men. Yeah. But, and a lot of those guys had to go out and get jobs during the off season.
Absolutely.
I mean, today's athletes, what they eat, what time they get up, how many workouts, it's all regimented. They're stronger, they're better, they're faster, but that's the whole point of passing it to the next generation to take it to the next level. I'm always interested to see if the longevity of PBR riders increases.
That's what I'm really interested in to see is, and I think without a doubt, just of pure biology and stuff like that plays a part in it, that the healthier you are and the more limber you are, and we talked about regrets a minute ago, and I think if I think about it as a whole from an athlete, a bull rider, if I could go back, I regret not doing hot yoga and I'm serious and stuff like this, and when I was training to get on this bull, we got on a few years ago just as a money, an opportunity to raise money for veterans. I went in and I trained with the likes of guys like Tim Kennedy and went to these places these UFC guys were training because I knew at 40 plus years old I'd have to be in really good shape just to handle one bull. And I saw what rigorous regimens they had, and it just blew me away.
Yeah, I've trained with Tim Kennedy. Not impressed. He's a good friend. I mean, a lot of Jane Fonda's, a lot of glute exercises. Overrated, man. Overrated. Yeah. Now, if he actually listens to this podcast, my wife and I will be moving, and I'll be on the run. So, I mean, this is interesting because you guys actually had a draft.
Yep. First draft ever. Yep.
Was it the draft was televised?
Televised draft. Yep. And
how many people showed up?
Well, when we had it there at the Texas Live there, right across from Arlington Stadium there in Dallas, right there in Arlington, obviously. And the first year was a lot of nerves because it was our inaugural draft. And I think from a team perspective and a coach to be, and our statisticians that JJ lined up, and trying to figure out what guys and putting them in tier groups and all this different strategy. When one guy may disappear and shuffle around, we were ready to pick up that next guy. So it truly was an experience. And we've all seen the NFL draft, the basketball, but
I mean, it doesn't mean you guys know what you're doing.
We didn't know what the hell we were doing.
I just like that guy.
Yeah, I just like the guy. But
I know JJ's in the crowd. So basically, JJ tried to bring Moneyball to the Austin Gamblers. They brought data, statistics.
We got to get on base.
Good. So for the listeners, give me the format for the team competitions and sort of how it's going to run and the growth of where you guys want to take this.
Okay, so basically, without getting too deep in the weeds with this, you've got 8 teams, 7 than us, and we're going to go to these events. We've got 10 events in the regular season, and then we'll culminate in that 11th event in Las Vegas at T-Mobile Arena, which is usually held for the World Championship for the PBR. But now that's changed. And so we're going to go in what we're calling games, and we'll be head-to-head with another team. Our 5 guys against their 5 guys on the first night. It'll flip-flop. Everybody does this throughout the night. So you got 4 games, and you know what I mean? So everybody's head-to-head. That'll flip-flop for the next day, and we'll do it again. And then that third day. And then there's some bonus round type competition in there that'll break ties and this type of thing. But the game hasn't changed, Michael. You still get on, and you nod your head, and you hold on. And it's still an 8-second game. And you can't fall off, and yeah.
Be that as it may, it is still an individual ride.
Absolutely.
Here's the interesting thing. It's the team dynamic.
It is.
And it's the same thing. I don't care if you have wrestling. I wrestled in high school.
Okay.
If you go 10 on 10 in the different weight classes, and I don't care if the team has 10 better wrestlers, if there is that esprit de corps, if there is that brotherhood that they understood, Stan, that they are standing by the guy all the way to the second that gate opens, that's a different element.
It is it's way different.
So you were an individual rider your entire career. Now you're the coach of it. How many do you have? 10 total?
We've got 11 guys right now. So we have 5 that'll go actively and be there, and we'll have a couple of alternates because of injuries and that type of thing.
Absolutely.
But we've got a dugout full of squad guys that'll be there as kind of in the dugout if we need to pull them up and move around the roster and that type of thing. So the league is allowing, I think, up to 12 guys right now, and I believe we've got 11.
How are you dealing? And I know you've coached and mentored young riders before. That's not new to you. How are you dealing with the title coach, man?
I'm dealing with it as best I can. I've never been, I've always enjoyed, kind of helping young guys and that type of thing, but I never considered myself a coach, obviously. And this is a new era. And I will tell you this. I think we talked about the Global Cup before, and I've been a coach at that, so I've dabbled in it a little bit and have an idea, and I've put on bull riding schools, and so I have an idea. But I think you hit upon it just a few brief seconds ago, and that's this platform of responsibility that is going to change this game, right? This team format. You're not responsible onto only yourself anymore. There's a team of guys that you're going to be looking at that are with you when you're pulling down on that bull, that are going to raise you up when you're down and just raise you even higher when you're up. And it is a game of ups and downs. Last weekend, one of our squad guys pulled a real bad groin. He's back. He's a Canadian kid. He's been in the Wrangler circle the last few weeks, and for him to be there for the next night and be right there back behind the buck and shoot with a big bag of ice on his groin and stuff, how does that not help the rest of the crew, right? So again, it's going to raise the bar, Michael. I can't even tell you, tenfold to have your team there with you in and out of the arena.
So I know these guys look up to you because you got credibility. What are the things you're trying to teach them? What are the things you are trying to instill in them to pull these 11 riders who are used to an individual sport? How are you trying to pull them together as a team?
I think they are professionals, number one. Yeah. So the approach for me is not to say that I can't throw some tweaks and some quirks and bring them to a place where they're aware of the mistakes they're making. We all made the mistakes. Whether I was 22 or 32, you still make the same mistakes, right? But what I'm trying to teach them or help them with is not reinventing the wheel. They've done this 1,000 times. They've been doing it, most of them, since they were little kids. And our sport is so reactionary because you're dealing with what you're dealing with. It's at its longest, it's 8, maybe 10 seconds. And the other 2 seconds past the buzzer is to get off, hopefully safely. So you're talking about, when you're on top, it seems like a lifetime. I don't want to, tell anybody it's not. But at the same time, to remind these guys that they have the foundation. They know what the foundation is. You go in there and you let things happen. You can't think consciously because if you do, you're too late. So it's all reactionary, and they know how to do it. Last weekend, our first preseason game, I will tell you this, I was so jacked up and excited, and they were so jacked up and excited, and some of them obviously coming from the dugout and being there and wanting to make the squad of 5, that they were almost too high.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And trying too hard, and it was clear. So I'm hoping that we can find, that center, and my job is to remind them, hopefully, of where, and help them find that.
I'm trying to think of the author, and I think it's Stephen Pressfield, who wrote The Gates of Fire. It's about the Spartans. And he talked in particular about how when the Spartans would line up against their adversaries on the battlefield, line against line, right, the adversaries would do these war cries and try to act all big, and the Spartans would maintain their composure. Because they know if they emulated what they would, the adrenaline, they would dump their adrenaline, and there's a calm. But I think that's a good sign. That means your team is excited to bring that championship back to Austin, Texas, and I'm going to hold you accountable for that, Coach.
Right. Yeah, and that's my job, right? I'm going to get ready to get whooped if we don't do it. And my plan is to do that. We've got the squad to do it. We've got some great talent. We got Jose Vitor Leme, who's an amazing athlete himself. He was going to go play pro soccer down in Brazil, which we know if you're able to go in and play pro in Brazil, you're not a slouch.
No.
So at 17 years old, he decides to become a bull rider. And then a few short years later...
Wait. He didn't start until 17?
He was 17.
Had he ridden bulls before?
His dad, from what I hear, had a background in rodeo and was a bull rider. But no, he was riding and playing soccer. He was playing soccer till he was 17 and decided he thought he would get on a bull. And what shall I say? The rest is history. He's 25 now.
It was Roger Federer, that the tennis player. I don't think he got serious about tennis. His parents were deliberate about making sure that he played as many sports, from gymnastics to soccer to everything he could in his teens, until he decided tennis was his thing.
And look at him now. Look at this. Another phenom.
We're going to have Jose on the podcast. I'm excited because I want to say he's a small man.
He's a little man. He's 5'5", 135 pounds. Jose, you're asking?
Yes.
Correct? Yeah, he truly is a gymnast, and he. We talk about the law of physics, and in our sport, Michael, or if you're talking about a rock climber, you're not going to find a 225-pound rock climber. You're going to find a guy like Jose because of the law of physics and the lower center of gravity and all the different things that play a part in professional bull riding. And he really is that perfect stature for a bull rider.
Well, Jose, we call him a little man. I'm going to tell you, I'm not a small guy. I'm about 6 feet. I'm about 200 pounds.
Yep.
The times I've gotten my ass kicked have been by a much smaller man. And I know the words that come out of their mouths because I've heard this multiple times. Are you good?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
I'm
sorry.
okay.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Good. There's another one of your riders that we're going to have on, and hot damn if this is not the American story, man. This makes me proud. Ezekiel.
Is who now?
I'm sorry, Ezekiel Mitchell?
Yes, Ezekiel. Yeah, good boy. And I was really excited to get Ezekiel on the squad. He grew up he's out of here, of Austin. And he's a heck of an athlete.
How did he learn to bull ride?
I think his dad, had some background from what I understand thus far. He's one of those kids that I'm getting to know, and he's great to be around. He's jocular. He keeps everybody really hopping and excited about everything. Whether we're going to the bank to sign autographs, or we're going to the arena to ride bulls, or we're just going to eat dinner. So, from what I understand, he's got a little bit of background. He loves riding horses. He lives in North Carolina now. He's got a girlfriend back there, and spends most of his day there. And he told me the other day that's what he wants to do when he's done riding bulls. He wants to be a horse trainer, and so I think his background is in that lifestyle, and I think he brings that love of the Western world, into his bull riding. And he was sending me photographs this morning on via text to bring on another squad guy that he's looking at. So he's helpful too.
Hey, North Kakalaki is a great state. I lived there for some time, so good for him. Well, Michael, we've got a journey with you guys. The Men's Journal Everyday Warrior is going to be following the Austin Gamblers. I'm excited to learn more about the sport. I'm excited to learn more about your high performance in your industry, which is what just fascinates me, is looking at high performers in every profession, because the attributes are always the same. I'm interested to see how your team comes together as a brotherhood.
Brotherhood, I like it.
And I know, talking to JJ, I'm going to come talk to you guys here in July.
Okay.
Maybe we'll put them through a little mini hell week through the night, no sleep.
Small.
Little bit.
A little one.
A little bit. Okay. We can set that up. We can get them cold. I'll tell you what. At the end of that, and this won't be released by that time, you will see those guys come together as brothers. We know how to do that.
I believe that.
Okay.
Yep.
So, Michael, we close this out with two questions. Same questions for every person. And I know you listened to the podcast with Terry Bradshaw.
I did.
I'm still waiting for Terry to bring me out to, is it Branson, Missouri? He promised me a song.
He's a hell of a singer, I guess.
Dude,
I understand. I didn't have any idea.
Funny enough,
watching him when I was a little kid. Mean Joe Green. They were my heroes when I was 5 or 6 years old.
The blonde bomber. Funny enough, when we had him on, testament to his generation, he knows nothing about technology. And when we finished, the mic was still on, and he's like, "Get that guy out to Branson. I love that guy." And I'm like, I'm still listening in. But so first one is, how's Michael Gaffney going to evaluate whether he lived an impactful, meaningful life?
How do I know I did?
Yeah.
My dad really only taught me one thing. He was a really soft-handed guy, never whooped me, never did. He grabbed me by the ear one time and he said, "You always treat people the way you want to be treated yourself." And I like to think that, Michael, that, I've gone through my life doing exactly that. I've always tried to look, from somebody else's perspective and look back and try to put yourself in their shoes and try to understand maybe what they're going through. And I know you can't, but I really live my life like that. And at times I'm kind of a pushover. I don't like conflict, but that's just it's who I am. It's who he was, and he had a lot of really great, sincere friends, and that was impactful to me. And so I like to think that when I go that I made somebody's day maybe just a little bit better because I was decent to them, because I'd want them to be decent to me.
You said your dad was a big, hard man, right?
Yeah, very, very much so.
And his philosophy sounds a lot like Teddy Roosevelt. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt. I might be getting this wrong. Speak softly, but carry a big stick.
And he could. He was a big man and had special combat boots and special gloves made for the jet fighter because he was a big guy. And but he never had to, I think, because people probably knew that he could really be bad if he had to be, but he never had to be.
Yeah, that's a great characteristic. You ever have time, send me a picture of your old man in service. I'd love to see it.
You'll get a kick out of it. Yeah.
Last question. What are those non-negotiables, those guiding principles, 1 to 3 of them, that have steered you in the right path? Those things that you're trying to teach your son. And I know we just hit one of them, treat people the way you want to be treated.
And I don't tell Merrick, he's going to be 14. You and I were just talking about our sons. And I don't tell him that very often because he really, he lives it. And it's just him. He was just made that way, which I'm really fortunate. But, I tell him that, every day, he comes home from soccer practice. He trains all the time, and I tell him, every day you pull up your bootstraps, and like you mean it. And I mean, when I say that, I said you're deliberate. When you make a call, you're deliberate about it. When I tell him, he's a very soft guy like my dad. I said, this is your chance when you cross over that mark on the soccer field. It's your chance to be, the big bad wolf. But he's still that good individual, but he can play hard and give it his all, but be deliberate when he does it. And lastly, yeah, that's tough. You know, I'm really proud of a couple of things in my life. You know, my accomplishments in the arena, and I feel like I'm a decent dad, and I feel like, you know, my wife is a really big part of my life. She's been my best friend since we were kids. I was 19, and we've never been apart, and I look forward to seeing her every day. So I throw that in there just because, you know, she's my rock. She's my foundation. She was with me through all the years of surgery and my whining and complaining and ice packing after surgeries. So yeah, I like to think that I've been a pretty decent spouse.
I'm going to read you something, and again, I said it was my parents' 54th anniversary. And my dad wrote something that basically said, you know, he didn't take any accomplishments for the 54 years. He said, your mom is the toughest person I've ever met. The rock, the foundation. She picked us up when we were down, me included. It's amazing the power of a woman. There's an amazing woman behind all great men, and we know that. And there's there's amazing men behind all great women. So
great partnership.
You know, you say something, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. When we were overseas, people always thought, like, oh, you're an American cowboy. And we'd say, yes, I am. Man, I'm from San Francisco, California. Never going back there. I lie to people. I tell them I'm from Frisco, Texas. You know, San Francisco, Frisco, Texas.
Texas.
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
I lie, but
hey, it's not really a lie.
There is nothing more American than a cowboy.
There is.
I don't know. Like, again, being in the military, never having even ridden a horse by that point, and we did mule training, horse training for pack mules, pack horses. We'd always say cowboy up. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
You do.
That's why I'm fascinated to get into this with PBR. And this is going to be a great year for me, and I'm going to learn a lot from you guys. And hopefully, when I talk to the boys, as well as I'm going to try to get Tim Kennedy. I'm also going to get a guy named Jason McNevis, who has more combat experience, ×3, than I could accumulate. And the guy he's a FedEx pilot. He was a Navy SEAL, and now he's a FedEx pilot. Wow. Okay. And I'm going to get these guys to speak to the team, and I'll tell you what. No other team is going to have this group of guys, and I'm not including that. You'll have Tim and you'll have Jason, and they'll deliver. But Michael, I can't thank you enough for joining us. I can tell you're a good man, and hot damn, let's bring that championship back to Austin.
We're going to, and I can't say, Michael, it's a pleasure for me because I have the utmost respect for, you know, guys like you and my dad and you know, Tim and, you know, everybody that puts their lives on the line for us as Americans, and it saddens me that we are at the place we are at because of what you guys have done and sacrificed for us. I mean, I think it's going to come full circle, and I just hope that people learn to appreciate more of what you've done and what our servicemen and women do.
Michael, I definitely have thoughts on that, but that's a conversation for another time.
Another time, sure.
All right, brother.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming.
All right, thanks, man.
All right.
Thanks.
Hey, and again, thank you guys for all the listeners for joining us. Another episode of the Men's Journal Everyday Warrior podcast. We will see you again.